everybody. Welcome to Andrew Z in the Morning Show. It's the interview show where we take interesting people and do interviews with them. And I have an old friend I can't even believe we're this old, but 20 probably plus years. I know, Ronnie Dahl. It was about the time that you were running around mid-Michigan. I was running around mid-Michigan. Ginger Z was running around mid-Michigan.
Right.
There's so many people that are all in Detroit now. There's so many of them in Detroit now, which you ended up in Detroit as well. How are you?
Hey, Andrew,
Yes.
do you remember the first story that I went into your studio and we talked about?
Oh, God, no.
It was the handicap parking story.
Oh. Wait, you caught people that were going into handicap spots and they weren't handicapped, right?
Yeah. So, and I was surprised. So I was with 13 ABC and we did the story. And of course, everyone in Toledo, everyone knows Murph with the Toledo Police Department. He was
love Murph.
Oh my God, a soundbite machine, right?
Yes.
So yeah, you had me in on that story, which I was surprised because I was like, I posed as a prostitute on the streets of Toledo. You didn't have me in on that show, on that segment.
You're killing me. Anyway,
oh my God.
For those who don't remember Ronnie, Ronnie is the number one, I swear to God, and there was a guy named Jim Kirchner at Detroit, but the best investigative people and of course you worked with Steve Wilson, who was the best of the best in Detroit. Oh. So, I mean, you come from a long line of hard-hitting investigative reporters, and you've done it all over, like I said, here in Toledo at 13 ABC, Detroit, Cleveland. You've done it all over. And now you've launched a podcast called Crimecasters, and it's you and Alysia. How do you say her last name? Sofios?
Sofios.
Alysia
Sofios.
Alysia Sofios. And you guys go behind the scenes of old stories that it's basically cold case crime stuff that you maybe reported on back when you were in the day-to-day grind as well, and you go back behind the scenes of these stories and revisit them and give them new light, correct?
Oh, because for us, people don't really understand this, but as reporters, the stories don't leave you. They always stay with you, but you get like a minute and a half, 2 minutes investigative. You might get 2.5 minutes, but so I had started something when I was actually reporting there in Toledo. Is every day you would keep a log, or I would, of all the stories that I covered, and then the date that I covered and all their names, and on the year anniversary, I would send a note to the family members, not necessarily looking to do a story, but just to let them know, hey, I'm thinking about you and I remember you. Mm-hmm. Because for them, it's not a story, right? It's
life.
And their life changed forever on that day. And it's just one of those things I kept up forever. Because when you're in a small market like a Lansing, a Toledo, you want that murder story, right? It's going to be the big story of the day. Right. In Detroit, there were days, Andrew, I cried. I was like, I can't do one. I can't do one today. I need a fluff, because it weighs on you. You know, I need puppies and babies. I can't handle it.
It's so funny you say that because, my ex-wife, who's in the news business for a couple decades, and she loved those. She wanted to be the lead. She wanted those crime stories. And it seemed like as she maybe grew older or maybe had a family, she said, I can't do it anymore. I don't want to go up to these houses anymore and have to talk to the families of these victims. She's like, it's not my thing anymore. And I guess there's probably a high burnout in it, I'm guessing.
Well, I think, again, when you're starting out in the business and you're in these small markets, and be blessed, by the way, if you live in a small town and these things don't happen. Because I do remember someone saying to me, you guys only come here when something bad happens, when someone's murdered. And I said, you know what? Be grateful that we still show up, because there are so many murders that never get covered, or so many cases of missing people that don't get covered. So be grateful that we are still here to tell your story, because one day you're going to want to continue to push for these answers, and the media is not going to show up. And I think for me, that was the hard one, is we would have the families reach out to us, because for them, again, it's not a 90-second headline. It's not a 90-second story. It's their life.
The most thing in their family that's happened to them.
Yeah. And they would continue to reach out. But, as a reporter, you don't get the decision as to whether or not you're covering that story for the day. We would pitch it and often fight for it. And sometimes to my detriment, by the way. But you become attached to the people and the families as well. And there's nothing worse than saying, I'm sorry, they don't want it today.
Yeah. Basically saying your family's not important enough. It's like, oh God.
But we were pounding on your door the day that it happened. And I'm not here to bash against mainstream media. We need mainstream media, and you know what? We need them to continue to do the job. And if anything, we need them to continue to invest and getting more people, so they're not running like crazy, doing 2 and 3 stories in an 8-hour shift. It's insane.
Right. And so the great thing that I love about what you're doing now is you are putting new light on these stories, and going back, years later or whatever. And we'll go back to the Nevaeh Buchanan, which was a huge story. I know you were in Detroit at the time, and it was a Monroe story. So it was huge for Toledo and it was huge for Detroit. But 24th, 2009, Nevaeh vanished from her home in Monroe. And then the sad part, she was 5 years old, I think, but they ended up finding her dumped on the edge of the river.
Yeah. So, again, this case for me, Andrew, was one of the bigger cases, one of the first bigger cases that I covered for Fox 2. At that time, I was what we call per diem. So you're freelance, but you're sharing that market, right, of Monroe with Toledo. And the good thing about that for me as a reporter, I had covered that area from the Toledo aspect, but I had lived in Detroit. I was driving to Toledo. So I knew a lot of the law enforcement people there. So I already had that relationship, because for reporters, it's all about your sources. Who do you know? Right. So even though it was my first big story with Fox 2, I knew people there. And I think the hardest thing for this, how is there not an arrest all these years later? And I want to say that
it's crazy.
There are so many layers to an investigation that it's not just on the detectives. It's really getting those pieces of the puzzle to be able to present it to the prosecutor, for the prosecutor to make that decision to file the charges. It's not the detective that makes that decision, it's the prosecutor. But one of the things, like back when we were covering this, because for those that aren't familiar, Nevaeh was actually living with her grandmother at the time. She has since passed, but her mom, who did not have custody, was watching her, because her mom, Jennifer, had been in prison, home invasion charges. I think she was stealing to support a drug habit. So she gets released, and she's actually watching Nevaeh. But at the time, the biggest thing for all of us as reporters, you're asking, where's the dad?
Yeah.
Where's the dad? Right?
Yeah, where is it?
So, well, you start looking into it, and, her father, Shane, he was 17 at the time that she was born. And he and Jennifer had a rocky relationship. They broke up before Nevaeh was born, but he tried to get custody. And this is the part of the story that when you have time, Andrew, it gives you grace that you can go back and explore a little bit more. Because when you're in the midst of the time capsule of trying to get new information and break new information, you don't really have time for these stories. And I think his is the story of a young father who tried to get custody. And was beat down by the system.
Mm.
And there is a guilt, I think, that lays with him that he didn't maybe fight harder, because he, he married Roxanne. They were together right after Nevaeh was born. They've been together all these years. They have several other kids, and Nevaeh would fit in perfectly. They really are a fun family, He's
got to have guilt like crazy, because if he would have gotten custody, then she would probably be here to this day. But I mean, you don't have to be. You can be objective and just say it's a hard battle for guys when in the system. It's hard to get custody. It's hard. The system's set up to be more favored towards the mom or the grandmother or whoever than it is a man. That's just facts. I mean, you don't have to be biased.
Yeah.
It's just the facts.
And I think for him it was, but there are so many rules and regulations that are put in place, and hoops that you have to jump through to get custody or visitation. And I don't want to say that it's wrong, because we want kids to be protected. Right. And we do know that there are so many times that the system fails these kids. But I think this is on the other side too. But he's 17. It's his first child.
Right.
So he didn't know,
Ronnie, what I don't remember. Was there ever a credible suspect, or how does it go from the one of the biggest stories in the world where Nancy Grace is following it to where there's never any? I don't remember what happened as far as no one was ever charged, no one was ever arrested, Nope. No one was ever anything. Was there even ever a credible person?
So here's one of the unusual things too, because they did come out. As part of the investigation early on, they did take two people into custody but not related, not a direct connection to Nevaeh. And they were George Kennedy and Roy Smith. And George Kennedy, they were both convicted felons who were registered sex offenders. But so basically, they got taken into custody for violating their parole because they weren't supposed to be around kids. Jennifer met George at one of her parole visits, and they start dating. And so they're around the kids. So that's early on. Like, I'm talking, Andrew, this threw everything in a tailspin back in the day. They named them. Which, now that I have law enforcement experience working for ATF, it's very rare for people, for law enforcement agencies to name someone, because typically the only time you'll name a person of interest or a suspect is if they're deemed a threat to society, if they haven't been arrested and charged. But early on, these names were leaked. They were arrested and taken into custody, and in fact, I think George just got out in 2020. But at the end of the day, they still have not been arrested. They do say every few months, someone from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department will come out and say, we're close to an arrest. This is the year, we're close to an arrest. I can tell you, I put in my FOIA, which is a Freedom of Information Act request, months ago, and it gets denied. Even something as simple as the full autopsy report or the 911 call made in to the Sheriff's Department. 911 calls are typically public information. Or even if you redact it, right? They didn't even do that. They just denied it, and they cite it's an ongoing investigation. Now, the one thing you don't want to do as a reporter is hurt an investigation to the point that when and if they do make that arrest, it's a contaminated, so to say, investigation, right? But in this case, I'm like, I don't understand it. You name these people and now they're released. You keep saying we're close. No, we're close. In fact, I talked to the one person from the department on the phone, when they denied my request, I was kind of like, why are you denying a request for a 911 call? I don't get that.
Yeah.
And they keep saying, no, we're close. We're close. And you're kind of like, I've heard that before.
You say they're close. Like you've spoken in the last few months. They keep saying they're close. It's been 13 years.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And you never want to release your investigative techniques publicly.
Right. Sure.
But we all know there are enough stories in the news now where technology is changing and it is helping law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of these investigations, especially cold case investigations involving like DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what they are going for. But I would say it probably is, because if you haven't arrested Roy Smith or George Kennedy by now, they're not your guys. That's I mean, I can't say 100%.
Right. That's your speculation.
It is speculation, but
Ronnie, what was the relationship between George and Roy?
They were just friends. And there was an age difference between them. And again, I think they were both convicted felons, and I think they just met each other both living in Monroe. Roy had loaned George his van that everyone talks about, because they did take the van. They will do a search warrant on it and process the van for any type of evidence. That did not happen. Mm-hmm. What's been so interesting in this case, because I followed it, I covered it. Mm-hmm. And, I do have sources behind the scenes on some of this stuff as well that you can't really talk about. But from Shane's point of view, and I think the more important thing is just from a family's point of view, mm-hmm. they don't get answers. They're kind of like just drifting out there every day, wondering. He doesn't have a lot of confidence in the sheriff's department that they're actually going to make an arrest. I think it does more damage when you come out and you say we're close.
Right. Close. Right.
And then it doesn't happen. Right. I mean, it's been how many years? You can't say you're close unless it's imminent. I worked on the other side. So
right.
For them to say that, I'm really surprised.
Ronnie, from your experience, then you don't think they say they're close. You don't think it's George or Roy. So I mean, there's someone that we've never heard of that they're looking at. You think?
I do. And I'm not saying that I don't think it's Roy. I don't think it's George. If it was George, they would have found a way to keep him locked up. Again, he was just released in July of 2020. Mm-hmm. So I think it's someone that is from that Monroe community, because Andrew, I don't know if, you probably have never been out to the location, but when we talk about it, it is so remote. I went out a few months ago just to take new video and new pictures, and I had been out there as a reporter. Mm-hmm. And I still had a hard time finding it. Wow. I had to stop, knock on doors, hey, mm-hmm. where is that? And have the neighbors take me, because it is that remote. And you're not finding that location unless you're from that area.
Very interesting. Well, I know that your podcast, it revisits the latest episode, revisits the story. You can get the podcast where you guys, please, they're doing such amazing work. Ronnie and I were talking off the air and getting caught up and stuff. They're doing such amazing work. Please support the podcast by wherever you get them. You get the 5-star review, you do the like, you do the follow, you do whatever platform you watch it on, whether it's Spotify or Amazon or Apple or Google's or whoever's it is.
Right.
Just follow it. It's called the Crimecasters Podcast, and the latest episode is the Nevaeh Buchanan case. But I know that a lot of people are into the crime.
So we have to say Crimecasters Network.
Crimecasters Network. Okay.
Yeah, I think like some things have it as Crimecasters, but Crimecasters Network, because there's like a Crimecast out there. And one of the reasons we came up with this is because obviously we're journalists. right?
Right.
So we were like news reporters. So it's like newscast,
Right.
podcast. You know,
Yeah, I like
but
that.
but yeah, really, it's you know, the crazy thing about this, you know, Andrew, and you probably get this, is like a segment on the news is a minute, 2 minutes,
Yeah.
and ours usually go 30 to 40 minutes, and
Right.
we still run out of time, and we're like, oh my God,
I
how did
know.
we run out of time? So, but these are the conversations as reporters we have off air all
Mhm.
the time.
Yeah.
And now we're actually able to bring it to you in length. So
Well,
we have a YouTube channel as well, but yeah, crimecasters.arc.com.
Is crappy is some of the mainstream media has gotten now. I love how long form programming has taken hold in the in people, so that you can spend more time on one or on a story and really, you know, get more in depth into it and do that stuff. That's the cool thing that's come out of all this, this new technologies and all this podcasting and everything. It's just so it's
Oh, we don't want to. Okay, so we don't want to date ourselves.
I know, right? But it's nerve wracking. It's nerve wracking, Ronnie, too, because we have to learn how to play in this new space. And like, there's the kids out here they're doing these stupid podcasts, and they're getting all the people. It's like, okay, how do we, you know, we're still figuring it all out. It's this new territory, which it's amazing because it just gives this open plate to do whatever you want. But then you got to figure out how to get people to it. So it's a
But
challenge.
just the fact that you can do it from home, like
I know.
editing video, right? Like I do everything Final Cut. Like I'm having to edit, and you know, Detroit's a union market, so we weren't allowed to touch anything.
Right.
So having to learn how to edit and use graphics, and you build your own graphics. I mean, when you start your own podcast, you're doing it from the ground up, like,
Right.
you know, getting the domain name, building it, calling people, right, you know, writing, and that part of it, and the investigating side we're used to, but it's everything else that comes with it. And TikTok, I haven't started. My co-host does the TikTok, and I will say we have more followers on TikTok than we do
I know.
Facebook and Instagram. I'm like, come on.
No, I know. It's like, can we all just agree to pick one? I'll do it real well. Let's just all say, okay, we're gonna do this one, because I can't do Insta and Facebook and now TikTok, and good Lord, you guys, you're killing me right now. Well, I'll tell you
what we're hoping, and not to, but what we're hoping for is, like, after listening to so many of these podcasts, is that we hope we have a little bit of a different format than anyone else that is out there. Like, you either have, like, you know, the journalist backed ones where they're doing the long form with the cut interviews, and they're telling a story, and they're doing great journalism, or you have people like some of the biggest podcasts, believe it or not, the biggest moneymakers are friends sitting around drinking wine, talking about the latest Dateline episode. And if I hear one more podcaster saying, according to my research, well, my research is conflicting, pick up the phone.
and you were it's gonna drive you crazy because you were a research junkie.
Right? I'm like, oh, but they are the ones. So what we try to come up with is that the first 10 minutes is basically laying out the details of the case. So for people, because we know the great thing about this new arena that we're all in, it's widespread, right? It's nationwide. Right. Like, I still get people. I had a YouTube page from my channel 7 days when I, chased down the illegal scrappers and the illegal dumpers. Like, I got an email from someone yesterday going, hey, are you ever afraid? So I think they were in Germany or something, so it's not even local. It's really national and international. So we try to break down the case, the first part of it. And then the second part is do that long form interview with someone connected from the case. If it's a detective or a prosecutor. I had an amazing conversation with the prosecutor on the Jabalee murders. It was a cold case, and they ended up bringing the son and charging the son, putting him on trial, but they lost. He was acquitted. But I think, to me, that makes the story that much more fascinating. or detectives or family members. Like, we try to bring that interview, give it a different format, give them their voice. But then in the last part, we kind of talk about the case like we talk about it as reporters in the newsroom, right? Like, these are the things we're saying to each other as we're going along, or we're talking about it, where I'm like, you're crazy. What about this question? Well, this is really kind of what happened. So it's not so 100% strict journalism. We're trying to create this new format that answers all the questions. We hope it's different enough that it gets people engaged, because at the end of the day, it's just trying to get the stories heard.
Yeah, I love it, Ronnie. And you are a rare breed in how much work you put in. You know, everyone now, all the kids now want to be on television. They want to go out and do the story and be seen on the news or whatever. But you, it's all about the behind the scenes and the legwork and putting in. And there aren't a lot of more of you people out there. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I love Crimecasters Network podcast. Check out the latest edition is with the Nevaeh Buchanan story from back in 2009. I love you, girl. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for taking time to talk to us.
Oh my God, it was so good catching up. We need to catch up more often.
We are. I'm going to check out every episode, and then I'm going to get a hold of you.
Okay, awesome.
Love you. Right,
Thank
Ronnie,
you.
I'm a hippo.
Broadcast Hippo Digital Media.
Come on!